Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. Currently there are three main areas of active clashes. The first area is Kherson, the second one is Robotyne, Verbovo, and the third one is Avdiivka direction. At least during the previous night, the most important and the most interesting updates came from these three areas. First, let's start with Kherson direction. According to information we have, the Russians yet haven't managed to force the Ukrainians to step back from Kharkiv. Currently, the Ukrainians save their presence in the city, in the village. According to latest geolocations, we saw this, the village was reduced to ruins, but yet the Ukrainians have some forces. They do have possibilities to make rotations, to bring some reserves. For these purposes, the Ukrainians using just the fast boats. The Russians are attacking and bombing the Ukrainians with artillery systems, yet the Russians haven't started any counter-offensive or storm operation with the purpose to clear the territory. When talking about the Pridniprovska, on this we get a few videos from this area. The Russians control the situation completely. They know and they see the exact places that Ukrainians use for landing, and they attack these territories with aviation bombs and artillery systems. We don't have any numbers about the results of those strikes, but even if there are no losses anyway, the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to use the boats, fast boats, to redeploy forces and reserves to the Ukrainian forces that located on the bank of the Dnipro River. So the situation was completely stabilized and under complete Russian control. To continue offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, first of all, the Ukrainians need to win the counter-artillery duels. They need to discover and to destroy every single Russian artillery system, and only after that the Ukrainians will have chances and will have possibilities to continue their offensive operation. Now, for now, they can use just the reserves and the equipment and the tank and the rounds that they managed to redeploy on this bank of the river before. Now we are moving to Robotyne area, and we got a lot of updates from this foothold. There are at least two active directions. The first direction between Kharkiv and Kopany. The Ukrainian forces continue sending more and more troopers to the south, trying to establish control and digging deeper on the recently captured positions that belonged to the Russians even a few weeks ago. They try to stretch their forces to concentrate more power before possible next offensives in this direction. Currently, the Ukrainians haven't started any big offensive, but it's just a question of time when exactly the Ukrainians will make another attempt to capture another trenches in front of Kopany. The situation in this area is not critical, completely controllable, but anyway, this direction is very interesting. The Russians try to control the main supply roads that goes from Kharkiv and Novodanilovka to the edge Kopany fortifications, and for these purposes they use FPV drones, and on this video we can see another episode of that supply road control as a result of FPV drone strike. Another Ukrainian light vehicle was destroyed that Ukrainians were using to support and supply their forces in the vicinity of Kopany on the fortifications between Novodanilovka and Kopany. When talking about Robotyne itself, as you can see, there are also a lot of icons with Ukrainian colors, which means that very interesting updates are coming from this territory. First of all, we need to mention that this morning the Ukrainians launched another offensive operation between Verbovo and Kopany, very powerful one. The Ukrainian sources are saying that the Russians are saying that Ukrainians currently use up to 10 armored vehicles, up to 10 tanks in this operation. By the posting of this, by the time the Russian sources posted this message, it was at 8 a.m. of the local time on the 21st of October. One tank of those 10 was destroyed. But this is just the messages, but the important thing is coming from the south of Robotyne. Very interesting video we got this night. Probably this event took place yesterday, maybe this morning. I believe that yesterday. And on this video we can see how the Ukrainian Leopard tanks were moving along the tree lines to the south in direction of Novoparakhopovka, and at some minute that tank was destroyed completely. There are a few interesting things in this video. First of all is of course the explosion, and that Ukrainians lost another Leopard while trying to storm Novoparakhopovka. The second interesting thing is that since the beginning of the battle for Robotyne, for Verbovo, for Zaporizhia area, we haven't seen Leopards so far to the south. So this is the first case when we sea Leopard on the south of Robotyne, and basically the Ukrainians, as a result of previous clashes and clearing operations and offensives that took place during the previous weeks, managed to clear the territory and prepare the foothold for involving Leopards in offensive operation. So this is very important. That means that Ukrainians started the second phase of the storming, and they started the attacking of Novoprokopivka, including with armored vehicles and heavy tanks. This is a very interesting update. Furthermore, the Russians during the day controlled also the main supply roads in this area. The Ukrainians tried to bring as much as possible infantry, as much as possible soldiers to the fields between Verba and Robotyne. The entire territory was under complete Russian artillery control. During the day, the Russians were working out every single target they received, and as a result of those artillery strikes, at least few armored vehicles were destroyed as a result of those artillery strikes. So the situation is not critical, but one more time, Leopards for the first time got the southern area so far. Very interesting. Furthermore, the Ukrainians also published few videos during the attacks, as a result of preparation or before preparation. They were bombing and attacking the Russian artillery systems. We understand that without successful counter-artillery duels, highly unlikely any side can achieve any success. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians, using their own drone, discovered Russian mortar system Sao-Nona, and as a result of artillery strike, or even maybe HIMARS strike, that artillery system was destroyed. In the vicinity of Pologi, the Russians were trying to send some reinforcements and reserves in direction of Novoprokopivka, but the Ukrainians also established fire control over some road, over supply road, and as a result of FPV drone strike, another support machine was destroyed. Now we are moving to Avdiivka. We got a lot of updates during the previous night. The Russian sources are saying that during the previous night there were a lot of artillery bombardments of the northern part chemical plant that is located on the north of Avdiivka, and as a result of those strikes, the Russians managed to destroy a very powerful, very big ammo depot on the north. Furthermore, the Russian sources are saying that Avdiivka is under very heavy fire 24 hours, 7 days a week, every single 15 minutes, according to the Russian sources, every single 15 minutes, the Russians bombed this territory with FAP 1500. So we see the level of the Russian focus on this area. We see that this area, Avdiivka, is reducing to ruins. As we understand that no matter the losses, the Russians took a decision to win the battle for Avdiivka, to capture this territory, and to force the Ukrainians to step back further. So the Russians are not going to give up. By the way, neither the Ukrainians, obviously. When talking about the situation on the ground, today we got another confirmation that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to establish control over the landfill, over this waste heap, garbage hill, but the thing is that we yet haven't received any video confirmation of that. Obviously, the Ukrainians will launch their own counter-offensive during the day, trying to force the Russians to step back, and there are very high chances that they will be able to do this, and for the third time in a row, the Russians will be forced to step back. This is a normal situation. It's not like, you might remember the battle for Robotyne. The Ukrainians during the battle for Robotyne entered the village maybe 4 or 5 times, and every time they were forced to step back. So it requires time before the side, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, can establish some control over the territory and dig in deeper. On the northern flank, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian trenches and fortifications along the railway, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to concentrate forces and to attack the Russians in their back. So just a regular military routine and work. When talking about southern direction, we got 2 areas of very active clashes. This area on the south of Donetsk and Severn, and the south of Tsarska Gora fortifications on the south of Avdiivka. When talking about the southern area of Donetsk and Severn, the Ukrainians launched counter-offensive operation. As a result of that attack, the Russians were forced to step back, because if you remember, as a result of previous clashes, the Russians controlled that line. Just a second. that this tree line was under Russian control, but the Ukrainians launched counteroffensive, and basically the Russians were forced to step back to the south. And after that, the Russians launched FPV drones to attack the Ukrainian tanks, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, a few Ukrainian tanks were destroyed. So this is the current situation in this area. The Ukrainians currently will try to dig in deeper and to save their presence and to complete the battle on any attempts of the Russians to attack in this area. When talking about the Starska Akhota fortification, if you remember, during the previous days, few days ago, the Russians managed to establish control over the stronghold, but the problem is that this is something like underground facilities, and the Ukrainians have a strict like supply road that goes from Tsarska Akhota to this machine gun position. So just a second. So this area, this machine gun position, has the strict connection with Starska Akhota fortification. The Russians have already established control over this territory during the clashes that took place a few weeks ago, not few weeks, a few days ago, and but now the Ukrainians having the access to this point from underground managed to return, and the Russians were forced to step back one more time. And currently the Russians are trying to reduce this territory with artillery strikes. They just try to ruin and to like make nothing from this area, and this will allow them to continue their offensive operation further. But I'm not sure whether the Russians are able to destroy this fortification, because it's a very powerful construction that was built a long time ago, and the Ukrainians managed to improve this area for many times, so it may take a lot of time when the Russians can bypass this territory further to the north in direction of Tsarska Akhota fortification. So we'll see whether the Russians are able to do this or not. Now we're moving further to Bakhmut. There are no changes during the day. Nothing special happened. The same Seversk and Liman front lines, and interesting updates are coming from the borderlands. The Ukrainian sources report that the Russians managed to concentrate up to 20,000 people on the Kharkiv direction with tanks, with armored vehicles, so it's like fully loaded army. Of course, highly unlikely the Russians are going to use this army for full-scale offensive operation, because this is not enough of like forces to do something. But this army can do something and can complete some preparation before upcoming further offensive operation. And more and more sources, Western sources, are saying that the Russians started preparation before the next offensive operation that obviously is going to take place in direction of Kharkiv. Because first of all, North Korea have already sent significant number of artillery rounds, and the North Korea is going to send more, and this will allow, and this will like give possibility to the Russians to fight without problems for the next year, and without any problems and lack with artillery rounds. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you can condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.